My name is Sacred Ground. I am 45 years old, and I work as a cultural liaison for the Ho-Chunk Nation, coordinating between tribal authorities and Wisconsin state parks regarding recreational activities on ancestral lands, where I've learned that some camping areas are built directly on native burial sites that contain spirits who will defend their resting places through supernatural retaliation against camping families. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where you are watching from, please. I've been working cultural preservation for 17 years throughout Wisconsin Dells and surrounding areas, specializing in protecting sacred sites and managing the complex relationship between modern tourism development and traditional Ho-Chunk territorial boundaries that extend throughout the Wisconsin River Valley. This happened last August while investigating supernatural incidents at Devil's Lake State Park near Baraboo, where camping families were reporting encounters with Native American spirits in areas where campgrounds had been constructed directly over unmarked burial sites dating back centuries. Devil's Lake sits in a sacred valley that holds deep spiritual significance for the Ho-Chunk people, with ancient burial grounds scattered throughout the area where modern camping facilities now accommodate thousands of visitors annually who remain unaware of the sacred land beneath their feet. The park's South Shore campground was constructed in the 1960s, during an era when archaeological surveys weren't required for recreational development, resulting in camping sites positioned directly over burial sites that had been used by Ho-Chunk ancestors for generations. Around 6 p.m., while conducting cultural impact assessments for camping families who had reported spiritual encounters, I began documenting evidence of burial site disturbance that immediately confirmed the supernatural incidents were related to ancestral territory violations. The Henderson family from Milwaukee reported finding pottery fragments and bone pieces around their campsite, despite park maintenance that should have prevented archaeological materials from being exposed in recreational camping areas. The artifacts were clearly from burial contexts and represented sacred objects that should have remained undisturbed in their ancestral resting places, rather than being scattered around modern camping equipment and recreational facilities. Around 8 p.m., camping families began reporting direct encounters with Ho-Chunk spirits, who seemed to be defending their burial sites against recreational intrusion through supernatural demonstrations designed to educate visitors about sacred land violations. The Martinez family from Madison described seeing figures in traditional Ho-Chunk clothing who appeared around their campsite during evening hours, and who communicated through gestures that clearly indicated disapproval of camping activities on sacred burial ground. The spiritual encounters included educational demonstrations about traditional burial practices and sacred land protocols, with ancestors attempting to teach camping families about respectful behavior on territory that held deep spiritual significance for Ho-Chunk people. Around 10 p.m., the spiritual education escalated when Ho-Chunk ancestors began demonstrating supernatural abilities designed to emphasize the sacred nature of burial sites and the importance of treating ancestral territory with appropriate respect and cultural awareness. Camping equipment was rearranged according to traditional spatial organization that reflected Ho-Chunk understanding of proper relationships between living people and ancestral burial areas, with tents repositioned to minimize disturbance of sacred ground. Food offerings appeared around campsites in patterns that demonstrated traditional protocols for respectful interaction with ancestral spirits, with camping families receiving instruction about appropriate behavior on sacred land through supernatural teaching methods. Around midnight, camping families reported being visited by multiple Ho-Chunk ancestors, who seemed to be conducting formal education about burial site sanctity and the spiritual responsibilities that came with camping on ancestral territory. The spiritual instruction included detailed information about traditional burial practices, the ongoing spiritual presence of ancestors in burial areas, and the cultural protocols required for respectful coexistence between modern recreation and sacred land preservation. Children in camping families were particularly targeted for spiritual education, with Ho-Chunk ancestors demonstrating traditional teaching methods that emphasized respect for natural environments and understanding of spiritual connections between people and land. Around 2 a.m., the spiritual education reached its most intensive phase when camping families experienced direct instruction in traditional Ho-Chunk spiritual practices, designed to establish proper relationships with ancestral burial sites. Families reported feeling spiritual presence that provided guidance about respectful camping behavior, appropriate offerings for ancestral spirits, and cultural understanding that would allow recreation to coexist with sacred land preservation. Most remarkable was that camping families who demonstrated respect for burial site sanctity and who followed traditional protocols experienced positive spiritual guidance rather than supernatural harassment or territorial retaliation. Around 4 a.m., I realized that the Ho-Chunk ancestors were conducting systematic spiritual education designed to transform camping families from unknowing burial site violators into respectful visitors who understood sacred land responsibilities. Working with Ho-Chunk tribal elders and spiritual advisors, I began implementing cultural education protocols that would allow camping families to receive proper instruction about sacred land respect before establishing campsites on ancestral territory. When camping families demonstrated understanding of burial site sanctity and followed traditional protocols for respectful behavior, the spiritual encounters became positive educational experiences rather than supernatural confrontations. Investigation into Devil's Lake camping areas revealed extensive burial sites throughout park boundaries that had been disturbed by recreational development, but that continued to be spiritually active and protected by ancestral presence. Traditional Ho-Chunk knowledge confirmed that burial sites required ongoing spiritual attention, and that ancestors maintained active presence in burial areas to ensure continued protection of sacred remains and cultural artifacts. According to tribal teachings, successful recreation on sacred land required cultural education and spiritual protocols that established respectful relationships between visitors and ancestral spirits, rather than unknowing violation of burial site sanctity. I continue working cultural liaison because respectful recreation can coexist with sacred land preservation when visitors understand traditional protocols, but I now include ancestral spirit encounter procedures in camping education and maintain coordination with tribal spiritual advisors. Current camping procedures at burial site areas include cultural orientation that educates visitors about sacred land responsibilities, traditional protocols for respectful behavior on ancestral territory, and spiritual guidance for positive interaction with Ho-Chunk ancestors who protect burial sites. Some Ho-Chunk ancestors in Wisconsin burial sites maintain active spiritual presence and will provide education to camping families about sacred land respect when visitors demonstrate willingness to learn traditional protocols for respectful coexistence with ancestral burial grounds. My name is River Deep. I am 38 years old, and I work as a water safety coordinator for Wisconsin Dells Tourism, managing aquatic safety for the thousands of visitors who swim, boat, and participate in water recreation along the Wisconsin River, where I've learned that some drowning incidents involve supernatural water entities that can make experienced swimmers vanish without leaving any trace. I've been coordinating Wisconsin river safety for 14 years throughout the Dells region, specializing in water rescue and emergency response for recreational activities that occur on river sections where sandstone formations create complex underwater conditions and hidden hazards for swimming and boating. This happened last July during peak tourist season while investigating a series of swimmer disappearances in the lower Dells area. Near downtown Wisconsin Dells, where experienced swimmers were vanishing in calm water conditions that shouldn't have presented drowning risks for skilled aquatic recreation participants. The lower Dells provides popular swimming areas where tourists enjoy the clear water and dramatic sandstone canyon scenery, but the river sections also contain underwater cave systems and rock formations that can create hidden dangers for swimmers unfamiliar with local conditions. The disappearances began with Mark Thompson from Chicago, an accomplished swimmer and triathlete who vanished while swimming in a popular area near the Jaws Rock Formation during calm weather conditions, with multiple witnesses present. Thompson had been swimming in water that was only 12 feet deep with excellent visibility and moderate current, but he simply disappeared beneath the surface without any signs of distress. medical emergency, or underwater hazards that might explain his sudden vanishing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that Thompson was swimming competently when he suddenly went underwater and never resurfaced, despite immediate rescue attempts by other swimmers and professional water safety personnel who responded within minutes. 2 weeks later, Lisa Martinez from Milwaukee disappeared under identical circumstances while swimming near the Romance Cliff area, vanishing in calm water during ideal swimming conditions that shouldn't have presented any significant aquatic risks. Martinez was an experienced open water swimmer with lifeguard training who understood water safety and who had been swimming comfortably in the Wisconsin River when she suddenly went below the surface and never returned to air. By August, 4 experienced swimmers had disappeared in Wisconsin river sections that were considered safe for recreational swimming, with all disappearances occurring in calm water conditions that provided good visibility and manageable currents. The disappearance pattern showed no correlation with weather, water levels, or environmental factors that typically contribute to drowning accidents, and all missing swimmers were experienced aquatic recreation participants who understood water safety protocols. Investigation into the swimming areas where disappearances occurred revealed no physical hazards, underwater obstacles, or environmental conditions that could explain how skilled swimmers would experience fatal difficulties in relatively safe water conditions. Most concerning were reports from other swimmers who had successfully completed their recreation, but who described unusual underwater experiences that created psychological distress and safety concerns during Wisconsin River swimming. Several swimmers reported observing unusual movement beneath the water surface, including shadows and forms that appeared to be much larger than normal fish or aquatic wildlife that inhabited the Wisconsin River system. The underwater activity seemed to be conducting surveillance of swimming areas and demonstrated particular interest in skilled swimmers who were swimming alone or who had separated from group swimming activities. Around September, while conducting comprehensive water safety investigation using underwater reconnaissance equipment, I began experiencing phenomena that explained the swimmer disappearances and revealed supernatural water entities active in Wisconsin River recreation areas. During underwater monitoring, I observed unusual water disturbances in areas where swimmers had disappeared, including movement patterns that indicated large entities moving through river sections where disappearances had occurred. The water entities demonstrated obvious intelligence and predatory behavior, approaching swimming areas during periods when swimmers would be most vulnerable and conducting systematic surveillance that preceded disappearance incidents. Around October, I witnessed direct evidence of water entities attempting to capture swimmers using supernatural abilities that allowed them to approach swimming areas without creating normal water disturbances that would alert swimmers to underwater threats. The entities could manipulate water conditions around swimmers, creating localized currents and underwater effects that would disorient skilled swimmers and make escape from capture attempts extremely difficult, even for experienced aquatic athletes. Most disturbing was the entity's apparent understanding of swimming psychology and their use of underwater tactics, specifically designed to overcome the defensive capabilities of experienced swimmers during recreational water activities. Working with Wisconsin emergency response teams and aquatic rescue specialists, I implemented enhanced water safety procedures, including increased underwater monitoring and modified swimming area management to reduce swimmer vulnerability to water entity capture. The safety enhancements successfully prevented additional swimmer disappearances, but also confirmed that previous missing swimmers had been taken by supernatural water entities rather than experiencing normal drowning accidents or environmental hazards. Investigation into Wisconsin River's cultural history revealed traditional knowledge from Ho-Chunk and other native communities about water spirits that inhabited river systems and that claimed territorial rights over aquatic areas used for swimming and recreation. According to traditional teachings, Wisconsin River contained spiritual forces that viewed excessive recreational swimming as territorial intrusion requiring response through capture of swimmers who violated traditional protocols for respectful water use. Traditional swimming practices included spiritual preparation and cultural ceremonies designed to maintain peaceful relationships with water entities and prevent territorial conflicts that could result in swimmer disappearances during recreational water activities. I continue coordinating Wisconsin river safety because water recreation provides essential family experiences and economic benefits for the Dells tourism industry. But I now include supernatural water safety protocols and maintain respect for traditional knowledge about water entity territorial behavior. Current swimming safety procedures include enhanced underwater surveillance for water entity activity, traditional spiritual protocols for respectful river use, and emergency response training adapted for supernatural swimmer capture scenarios involving Wisconsin River water entities. Some water entities in the Wisconsin River maintain territorial claims over swimming areas and will capture experienced swimmers who engage in recreational activities that violate traditional protocols for respectful interaction with spiritual forces that control river recreation access. My name is Forest Path. I am 42 years old, and I work as a trail coordinator for Wisconsin State Parks, managing hiking safety throughout the dense forest regions near Wisconsin Dells, where I've learned that some areas contain supernatural forest conditions that can trap experienced hikers in endless woodland environments, where normal navigation methods become completely ineffective. I've been coordinating forest hiking safety for 16 years throughout Wisconsin's extensive woodland areas, specializing in search and rescue operations for hikers who become lost in dense forest environments, where thick canopy cover and complex terrain can create disorientation even for experienced wilderness enthusiasts. This happened last September while investigating missing hiker reports in the Baxter's Hollow area of Devil's Lake State Park, where experienced hikers were becoming lost in forest sections that should have provided straightforward navigation, but that seemed to trap people in endless woodland environments. Baxter's Hollow contains some of Wisconsin's most pristine forest ecosystems, with diverse hardwood forests and complex topography that can challenge navigation skills. But the area also provides established trail systems that should prevent serious disorientation for prepared hikers. The missing hiker incidents began with Janet Miller from Green Bay, an experienced backpacker with over 20 years of hiking experience who became lost during a routine day hike on marked trails that she had traveled successfully multiple times. Miller had been hiking the established trail system with proper equipment and navigation tools, but she simply failed to return at her scheduled time and couldn't be located despite comprehensive search operations by professional wilderness rescue teams. Search and rescue operations covered over 50 square miles of forest using ground teams, aircraft reconnaissance, and specialized tracking equipment, but found no trace of Miller or any evidence of where she might have traveled after entering the Baxter's Hollow Trail system. 3 weeks later, David Chin from Madison disappeared under similar circumstances while hiking established trails in the same forest area, vanishing during ideal weather conditions on trails that provided clear directional markers and navigation references. Chen was an Eagle Scout with extensive wilderness experience, who understood forest navigation and emergency procedures. But comprehensive search operations failed to locate any evidence of his presence in forest areas where he should have been easily tracked. By October, 5 experienced hikers had disappeared in Baxter's Hollow forest areas that were well marked and regularly maintained, with all disappearances involving skilled outdoors enthusiasts who understood wilderness safety and navigation techniques. The disappearance pattern showed no correlation with weather conditions, trail maintenance, or seasonal factors that might explain why experienced hikers would become seriously lost in familiar forest areas with established trail systems. Investigation into the forest areas where disappearances occurred revealed no unusual terrain features, trail damage, or environmental hazards that could explain how skilled hikers would lose their way in woodland areas they had previously traveled successfully. Most disturbing were reports from other hikers who had successfully completed their forest recreation, but who described navigation difficulties and spatial disorientation that exceeded normal forest hiking challenges. Several hikers reported experiencing trail conditions that didn't match their previous hiking experiences in the same forest areas, with familiar trails leading in unexpected directions and landmark features appearing in locations that contradicted their navigation memory. The forest navigation problems seemed to be creating maze, like conditions where familiar trails would lead hikers in circles or into unfamiliar forest areas that didn't correspond to established park boundaries and trail system maps. Around November, while conducting comprehensive search operations using advanced tracking technology and forest navigation equipment, I began experiencing phenomena that explained the missing hikers and revealed supernatural forest conditions affecting trail navigation. During forest reconnaissance, I discovered that trail systems in Baxter's Hollow were experiencing spatial distortions that created navigation conditions exceeding normal forest disorientation, and that seemed designed to trap hikers in endless woodland environments. Established trails would lead in directions that didn't correspond to trail maps or GPS navigation, with forest layout changes that created maze conditions where normal orienteering techniques couldn't establish reliable position references. Around December, I witnessed direct evidence of supernatural forest manipulation that confirmed missing hikers had encountered woodland conditions that challenged basic understanding of forest geography and navigation science. Forest sections would change their spatial configuration during hiking activities, with trails appearing and disappearing to create navigation conditions that prevented hikers from reaching their intended destinations or returning to familiar trail access points. Most disturbing was that the supernatural forest changes seemed to understand hiking psychology and were creating navigation challenges specifically designed to overwhelm the orienteering capabilities of experienced wilderness enthusiasts. Current hiking safety procedures include enhanced traditional navigation training that incorporates spiritual awareness, alternative route planning for forest areas where spatial distortion has been documented, and emergency search methods adapted for supernatural woodland navigation interference. Some forest areas in Wisconsin can experience supernatural spatial manipulation that traps experienced hikers in endless woodland environments where normal navigation methods become ineffective, requiring traditional forest wisdom and spiritual awareness for successful wilderness hiking safety.